DegloireSpace signing in. You're with your partner and you're in a function, a work function, let's just say. And while you're there, you're mixing around, socializing, listening to different people talk. And then as you're sitting there, you decide, you know what, I have valuable input into this conversation. As you start to talk, somebody talks over you. Okay? You hold back. You find another opportunity to talk. As you're about to talk, you say something, somebody belittles what you say. And nobody even comments about what you said. They just let it go. They just ignore it. They just dismiss what you've said. No one even replies to it. And instead, just a new conversation started. You smile it off and, you say, you don't really say anything about it. You just let it go. You just kind of like fit into the environment, shaking your head. Some people see it. Some people have observed it. And they've seen that you've been disrespected. They even comment that you're pretty mature for not reacting. And you nodded that comment, but deep down you know that the reason you didn't say anything wasn't because you're mature. It wasn't because you're peaceful. You're just afraid that, you know what, they might lead to a confrontation. It might lead to some awkward moment. It could lead to some negative view about you. So you're labeled as peaceful, but deep down you feel it's cowardice. There's a big difference between letting someone go because you're strong versus fear. If you've seen the animated movie from Disney, Beauty and the Beast, in the end of the movie, Gaston and the Beast, they're fighting on top of the castle roof. And as they're fighting, the Beast gets the upper hand and Gaston is now hanging from the edge and the Beast has got him. And he's looking up at the Beast and he's like, please, please don't let me go. And the Beast is raged. He's looking and then he feels a mercy in his heart. And he picks him up and tells him to get out. The reason we make it an act of heroism is he was able because he has the power and he restrained himself. And you see in that, this is the secret. When you have the total strength and the ability to fight back, and you can if you want to, but for some reason, you choose not to. This is very different to someone who's helpless and they're choosing, well, they're not really choosing, they're just not fighting, not facing conflict. It's a very different scenario. One has the ability, one doesn't have the ability. One is paralyzed, one is choosing. One's got humility, he's humiliated inside him. The other one has pride. Think of it like a seasoned soldier who refuses to go to a particular battle because he does not agree with the reasons. Regardless of whether the reasons are right or wrong, it doesn't sit with him. He doesn't agree with it. And the reason that came to mind is this is back in 2011, I think it was. 2010, 2011, I was working with a man who actually was in this situation. He had become a teacher, but before that, he was a soldier. He was a soldier in, part of the Middle East. He'd been in a few wars before, and in this particular one, when they gave orders to attack that one, it just didn't sit well with him. He told me, I was like, this is wrong. And he decided he's going to desert. And he did. He deserted. He was chased by soldiers, but he managed to get away. I remember he had a really big adventure where he went through the desert and managed to survive and, changed his life around, changed his life to something different because he didn't agree with that. There's a big difference between someone who took a stance like that versus someone who gets a challenge in their life and they're like, oh, this might make me this, uncomfortable. Very, very big difference. There's a big difference between acting from your values and acting out of, oh, this might change me. I'm scared. There's a very big difference. And this leads us to loud cowards and comfort zones. Have you ever noticed that there are some people, when they're in their social group, they're very loud, and when they're in their comfort zone, they're loud, and they could even be bullies. They shine in their little circles and they're quick to give opinions and judgments about people. But when it's time for them to show up, for example, to pitch their dream, to ask for a promotion, to stand alone on a stage, they vanish. The online trolls who insult people and criticize behind the screen, but in person they can't look someone in the eye. You also have the self-proclaimed alphas of the gym who walk around and, they're pretty assertive in their tone, but then when they're put into a test that doesn't require the muscles, they falter. For example, their girlfriend leaves them. And then we have, of course, the critic who always knows better. But he himself or she herself, they never create anything. They never do anything. These are the first types of cowards, the loud cowards. They appear on the outside like they're doing so much, but you scratch the surface and there's nothing happening. And there's the violent cowards. These ones only act tough when there's a power imbalance. You've all seen the teacher that humiliates students. This person tries to show that they're confident, that they're ruling the class, that they're making order, but they're humiliating, they're looking down upon. This kind of person is an abusive coward. The student cannot reply back to him or her in the situation. It reminds me of the Pink Floyd, The Wall. Teacher, leave them kids alone. And they show you when that teacher goes, he's in the class, he's a bully. He mocks a little kid because he's writing a poetry. And then when he's at home, his wife is telling him, why didn't you eat your vegetables? And he's like, These aren't strong people. They're just acting out in a space where they feel safe to dominate. The third type of coward is the passive coward. This is the one who hides behind politeness. I'm just being nice. They're really afraid of rocking the boat. They try to avoid confrontation at all costs. They stay quiet when it matters. When it's time to take a stance, they don't do anything. Deep down inside them, they're screaming. They're not happy. So cowardice comes in many forms. Some of it loud, some of it quiet, but it's always small. Bravery is action despite fear. And that is a key point for us to make. Don't think that if you're brave, it means you have no fear. It means that you can act despite having that fear. We all start somewhere in our lives. And in the way that we start, we have different fears that we must face. Some of us are afraid of physical altercations. Some of us are afraid of taking major steps in our lives. Some of us are afraid to speak up. Some of us are afraid to disappoint others. Some of us are afraid to travel. And the thing is, you can start comparing and saying, this one's more severe than any. But to be honest with you, that's an unfair judgment because they're all severe. The one that you're suffering from, that's the most severe to you. That's the one that is going to halt your life. And unfortunately, the fear that you have is going to keep confronting you. It's going to keep knocking on your door. Just possessing fear is not what makes you a coward. Coward is when you're meant to take a stance and you don't. You're meant to move and you don't. You're paralyzed. And sometimes, not only that, it makes you go against your own values so that your insides start beating you up. And then in the end, you prefer putting your comfort zones ahead of your movement. The problem with being a coward is that your niceness or your toughness, they're not genuine. The good news is it reversible? Yes, we can overcome it. The key to it, though, is to be genuine. For example, don't think that your solution is going to be, I'm in fear, so I'll grow muscles to intimidate, because you haven't really addressed that fear. You're just trying to create a cover that creates a border. But what happens when someone crosses that border? You're back to square one with all those muscles. Banding with bullies, that's also not the answer, because now what you're doing is you're afraid that they'll turn on you. So you join them and then you collaborate with them in what they're going to do. And you're also not genuine, because originally you banded with them because you don't like that behavior done to you. So now you're doing it to somebody else. So what does it mean to be genuine? The first thing you need to do is admit the fear. Once you've admitted the fear, you know what you need to deal with. And why I call it being genuine is, don't hide it. Don't say, I'm being kind, when you know it's not being kind. When someone disrespects you and you don't say anything, that thing eats you up inside. And And you start thinking of, after the incident has already passed, you start thinking of comebacks. Oh, I should have said this, I should have said that. It's eating you up. Your lack of action is eating you up now. And this is what we're trying to avoid, because whenever we face a situation with cowardice, with not being genuine, it's going to eat us up. It's not just going to go away. It's going to sit somewhere inside you. Somewhere inside you is a voice that's going to tell you, you're just not it. You see, fear is not the problem. Hiding it from yourself is. You want to travel, but you're afraid. So instead of that, you start saying, time is not right, or it's too late for me. I'm a little bit too old to travel. And inside you, it's got nothing to do with that. It's just because you don't want to be in an uncomfortable situation. When you name it, you start looking into it. When you start looking into it, you can sometimes it can be a revolution. Boom, you change. Most times it becomes progressive. So for example, I'm afraid of this. What can I do to help myself? And then you start looking into ways. So now you're actually addressing the issue. And it's a quest of making ourselves better. Suddenly you have questions that actually make sense. So for example, you look into it. Do I need to make myself physically stronger? Do I need to find out how to attract help towards me? Do I need to learn how to stay alert? If you're scared of the water and you find out that that's my issue. So now you've named it and you start looking into it. Maybe, this week I'm going to aim to dip my toes. Oh, I'm scared, but I did it. Okay, it's not so bad. Maybe I'll dip my whole ankle in there. And then you work your way slowly to it. That's one way of facing types of fears. Do not judge yourself for having fears. Fears are normal. Some of our fears are natural in a human being, while others have been programmed into us. For example, growing up, I was really programmed to be afraid of dogs. Don't be near them. Don't let them touch you. They're dirty. They bite. And all this stuff. So I was really programmed to hate dogs or to be afraid of them. I never really hated them. I used to love, when I see a movie and the hero is playing, with his pet dog. I used to love that. Now, as I grew older, I started, 17, 18, I knew this was a problem because I'd be walking in a place and then I see a dog and I'm like, oh, this is, and I get all anxious and nervous. So I knew that is something I need to work on. I need to make better. At the time, we didn't have YouTube and we didn't have that kind of thing. But I started looking into how do people behave around dogs. And I remember there was a movie that we saw and, he tells the little kid, I can't remember, I think it was a hyena. He tells the kid to keep himself upright. And I started, using that kind of things. And then once YouTube came out and all that, I remember the dog whisperer, watching his recommendations. And I started inputting that. And, I worked with it slowly. I've never had a dog of my own, but there was an incident, I'll tell you, I traveled to Chile, in South America. And when I was there, there was stray dogs everywhere. There was no way around dogs. And I had a particular incident where a dog, German Shepherd, massive one, followed me for about 1 kilometer. He was so gentle. And he was just following me and looking at me with these beautiful big eyes with so much sentiment. And it made me change because I saw in him a friend. I moved there were people waiting for the bus. I just stood between them and he, out of all people, decided he's going to come and sit next to me with his back straight and just looking at me. When I got onto the bus, he was so upset. It broke my heart. It really made me want to think twice about dogs. I'm working on this because I'm not happy with it. And another incident was I took guitar lessons and the teacher had a dog. And the dog, while I was playing the guitar, would be sitting right under my feet and his tail would be whipping my leg. And I started seeing that dogs are okay. My fear is, in a way, unjustified. It's programmed. I didn't choose to have that fear. It kind of like just programming that happened, but I worked on it. And in our lives, we're bound to have fears. Some of them just pop up and some of them are built over years. Another story, I was in 2013, I was on my motorbike and I got hit by a car. And of course it hurt a lot. And, for about 2 months, lifting my shoulder was a difficult thing. And after I got better, I got onto the motorbike and I felt fear. I was trembling. And I said to myself, hey, if I was to quit motorcycle riding, it's not going to be because of fear. And I started warming myself up again to it. Going for little rides, coming back. Okay, that wasn't so bad. And then eventually, I sold that particular motorbike. I got another one and just got myself back into it. And this all told me that fear doesn't equal that you're a coward if you're working on it. And here there's a note to make. Just because we don't want to be cowards, it doesn't mean we just jump into dangers and justify. No. Taking caution is fine. Imagine, for example, you've heard that there's a beach where a shark attack has happened or has happened. And you decide, hey, I'm going in, but I'm not going that deep. And then people tell you you're a coward. You're not a coward. You are doing the right thing. You think there's a potential danger, and why would you put yourself in that kind of danger? That is different. So be careful as well, because sometimes people tell us things. Being cautious is not the same as being a coward. If there's something you're not doing because, hey, you know what? The risks of it are way too high. I've heard stories in Australia that there are people who go camping in places where there's crocodiles, and these crocodiles, hey, you don't mess with crocodiles. So here, caution is more important. When you see that sign that says don't swim, crocodiles around, this has got nothing to do with your courage and bravery. Taking that sign seriously is important. If somebody spotted a crocodile, am I being cautious or am I a coward? It's obvious. And it's okay. If I'm in a place and I say, beware crocodile, and fear arises in me, you know what? That's a smart thing. Unless, of course, it's part of your job. You're the late Steve Irwin. Wisdom knows the line between fear and self-preservation. And another thing we need to be cautious of is what we see in the media. In the cinema, for example, we know that, our hero, there's 5 guys on him and he's so brave that he'll take them on. That kind of heroic act. Sometimes that isn't the answer. And I'll give you 2 examples in history. Mahatma Gandhi, when they did the Salt March, he chose that, hey, this is a non-violent approach. We will not retaliate in any physical violence. They chose a really calm approach to a violent situation. Another very famous one is, of course, Jesus. Jesus, those who live by the sword die by the sword. In his time, there were people they didn't agree. They were saying, hey, these are the Romans. We got to fight them. We got to fight back. And he saw it differently. And if you look at it down the timeline, he actually was right. And Rome turned Christian a few hundred years later. So he played a long game. That long game is what worked. So standing up for yourself has many different facets, different ways. What's important is that you act out of strength. And when you lack that strength, you work on it. Peace is knowing that you can roar when you choose to. Roaring at everything is not wise. DegloireSpace, signing out.